We're going to talk about cell structures that all cells have in common. Okay, and we have a lovely picture here of an animal cell and a plant cell and a bacteria cell. Now this is a diagram, it's not an actual photograph, it's not what it looks like through a microscope, it's a model. And so with every model there are some limitations, and even this one has some limitations. So let's go over it, and we're going to highlight all of the things that are in all of these cell types. So these two are eukaryotic, this one is prokaryotic, but they still have some things in common. So all of them have a cell membrane. All of them have a cytoplasm. And then we kind of look, oh, this one has a nucleus, this one has a nucleus, this one does not. But what they do have in common is that inside of that nucleus, there is DNA. And so we aren't going to highlight the fact that it has a nucleus because not all cells do, but all cells have DNA, including your prokaryotic cell. And so then down here at the bottom, ribosomes, it has labeled on the bacteria, but it doesn't have them labeled on the animal cell or the plant cell, although you can see them. See these little tiny dots? And they're also here, so we're going to write ribosomes. And because they didn't label them, it makes you think they don't have them, but they do. We're going to draw a couple more, and we're also going to put some on this little area outside of the nucleus. That's called the endoplasmic reticulum. And we're going to draw a line here so that we know that animal cells also have ribosomes, and plant cells also have ribosomes. And so we're going to add that to our diagram. Here's a few little ribosomes there, a few floating in the cytoplasm. And so there are the four things that all cells have. They all have cytoplasm, they all have a cell membrane, they all have DNA, and they all have ribosomes. Now let's look at page 109, and it's going to tell us that eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells are different sizes, different appearance, but they all share a few basic structures that are necessary for life. So the cell membrane surrounds the cell because it's a protective, flexible barrier, but what it does, its function, is to control which materials enter and which materials leave the cell. So it's kind of like the ticket taker at the football game. If you have a ticket, you get to come in. If you don't get to come in. Or you could say, when I was in school, we called it the border patrol. So at the border of any country, they have a setup where you have to be a citizen or not a citizen, whatever. They let some people in, they let some people out. That's what the cell membrane does. Now, it also tells you that plant cells and bacteria and archaea have a cell wall that is on the outside of their cell membrane, but animal cells do not have a cell wall. Okay? Cytoplasm is a gel-like liquid inside of the cell, about 80% water, and that is where the organelles and a few proteins are suspended. Your definition of suspended is probably to get kicked out of school. This definition of suspended means that the organelles hang inside of the gel. Think about your grandma's Jell-O with the fruit in it, and how that fruit's not floating at the top, it's not at the very bottom, it is suspended within the Jell-O. That is part of the job of the cytoplasm. It also helps to maintain the shape of the cytoplasm. And then it talks about quite a few organelles, which we're really not going to focus on anything except for the one organelle that they all have, and that is the ribosome, which is a type of organelle that does not have a membrane around it. It is a tiny organelle, it's like little dots, and its job is to make proteins. So prokaryotic cells have ribosomes, but they don't have any other organelles. So when it says they have no membrane-bound organelles, well, ribosomes happen to be the only organelle that don't have a membrane to bound them or bind them, to wrap around them. And so ribosomes are the one that is in all of the cell types. They also all have DNA, and you need to know that DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. That's why we abbreviate it DNA, because it's a lot shorter. And what does it do? Well, it contains the instructions for all cell processes, or the blueprints, so to speak, and it also controls what proteins are made in the cell. Ribosomes make the protein, but the DNA tells them what to make. It also determines the traits for each organism, and it's inherited from the parent if it's unicellular, or parents if it is multicellular. And in eukaryotic cells, it is found in the nucleus, but in prokaryotic cells, it's found in the cytoplasm. At the bottom, the question says, based on the similarities, things that are alike, between these cells, what might be one function they all share? Now, a lot of kids are tempted to say, they all have ribosomes, but that's not the function. So one function all cells can do is make proteins, because they all have ribosomes. Or one function all cells can do is control what comes in and out of the cell, because they all have a cell membrane. Or one function all cells can do is control what proteins are made, because they all have DNA. So you're going to answer that question. And then we're going to take this paper and we're going to put it onto page 11 of our journal. And your title will be Cell Structures All Cells Have. And you're going to cut with me. Make sure you just have the one page, so 109 and 110. And you're going to just cut above where it says visualize it, just to the very center, like that, because we want to keep this. And then we're going to come right up the side, all the way up to the top of the page. So we're going to use this in our journal. In fact, I'm going to trim around this outside edge, kind of like a little arch, and I might even trim off this edge a little bit, because I want to have room to write a few notes. I'll round out that corner too. Okay, and then I'll throw all my little snippets away. Now I'm going to pre-fit. I want it to be not hanging off the bottom. Okay, I don't want it hanging off, but I want to be able to write over here. So I'm going to put a thin line of glue about 1/2 inch from the edge. It doesn't take much. It's just paper. So we're going to flip this over and press that in. And then now we are actually going to take a few notes about the 4 things. I could have said structure, that probably would have sounded better. 4 things that all cells have, whether they're prokaryotic or eukaryotic, doesn't matter, they all have them. And we're going to say what their function is. The cell membrane controls what can enter or leave the cell membrane. Then we have the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm helps to maintain the cell shape, and it holds those organelles. Then we have the ribosomes. Ribosomes are tiny little organelles, and their whole job is to make proteins. Now, they know what proteins to make because of the DNA, and DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So there's the D for deoxy, and ribonucleic is the N, and the A that they get DNA from. And we know that DNA is genetic material, so we could write genetic material. Those are synonyms. Every time you hear genetic material, think DNA. Every time you hear DNA, think genetic material. And then what does it do? It controls the protein, which proteins are made, and it gives instructions for all cell processes. I've heard it sometimes called the blueprint. A lot of times we think of the nucleus as being the brain of the cell. Well, it's where the brain's housed, okay? So really the DNA is what's running the show. And it happens to be in the nucleus. But bacteria cells also have DNA, and that runs their show. So the DNA is the one that's in control of everything that's happening, and has all of the instructions for how to get it done.